Welcome back to Schmattz Outdoors, everyone. Today we're going to be going through a step-by-step process on how I make my raccoon stretchers. I know there's other people probably do it different ways. I think as long as you get to the same end result and get a pelt shaped the right way, that's all we're looking for here. All right, so let's get right into it. So what I have here is a sheet of 3/8 plywood. I'm going to be making raccoon stretchers out of plywood. I know some guys don't like that. If you don't like it, use a pine board, use a basswood board, use whatever. I'm not spending the money on a basswood, board or a pine board or anything like that for a raccoon stretcher. I do have some made out of pine boards, but it doesn't really matter to me what you use. I'm going to use a sheet of plywood. I can get 8 stretchers out of 1 sheet of plywood. And I'll go over how I do that here in just a second. But with that in mind, like I said, I can get 8 out of this 1 sheet of plywood. So, I want to say I have about $25 into this sheet of plywood. And I can get 8 stretchers out of there. That's like $4 a stretcher. No, less than that, $3 a stretcher. If you can buy pine boards, 5 foot long, 8 inches wide for less than $3 a piece, good luck to you. So, and I have a bunch of plywood ones already. They work nice. The only thing is on like the plywood ones, it's a little tougher to get your stick pins pushed in. So a lot of times I just use a little hammer and I kind of, pull the pelt down, stick it, and just tap it with the hammer. And I don't pound it in. I just literally just tap it just so it sticks. And I don't really have any issue with my pins pulling out. And then, they're usually loose enough I can just grab them and pick them right out when the pelt is dry. So, all right. What I have here, I have NAFA sheet on the 3 sizes of stretchers that they recommended. I have fur harvester sheet here, and I'll put up some better pictures of these at the end of the video so you guys can see what I'm looking at here a little better. And then in the middle one here, I'm a mechanical designer, mechanical drafter. So what I did is I laid out my pattern of what I wanted for stretchers, how to make them each fit in here to get 4 running this way and 4 running this way. I don't know how well you could be able to see. So right here is a stretcher coming from that side. This is a stretcher coming from this side. And you can see if you just kind of nuzzle the noses together, you can get 8 of them out of a sheet of plywood real easily. What I'm making now, let's go right into it. On this corner here, I am going to make NAFA's wide raccoon stretcher, but I'm going to make it 6 feet long, so 72 inches long. All the rest of my raccoon stretchers, and this goes for any of them I currently am using, they're all 5 foot long. Almost all the time for me, a 5 foot stretcher is more than sufficient for the raccoons that I catch. I've had a couple over the years. So 2 trapping seasons ago, I caught a 32.6 pound raccoon. He was well past 6XL, well past 6 plus. I mean, he was like probably 7XL if you would have, pinned him to the normal, gradient, because each size is roughly 3 inches. So he was like 3 inches or more past the 6XL line, and he had a full complete tail. So with that, the tail was like 6 inches past the bottom of my 5 foot board. So I ended up putting him up on an otter board because it was the closest thing I had to the right shape. And I got him tan for myself, so I wasn't as concerned about the shape of him. And I've had a couple other raccoons over the years that I've had the same thing happen with, that, you know, like the tail was like right to the end of my board or even like over the end of the board. So I want one 6-inch one, and I'm making it the wide, NAFA's wide pattern because again, they're the biggest raccoons. So I want to use the wide pattern, you know, to make sure, and then a 6 foot so to make sure they're not sticking off the end. And that way they actually get stretched in the right shape. Just because it's 6 feet doesn't mean I can't put a shorter one on there. You know, your average 3 or 4 XL raccoon, I'll be using it for them too. I just want one just in case I do catch, you know, some 30 plus raccoons, 30 plus pound raccoons. Because I've caught, I think 3 or 4 now over the years that I know for sure were over 30 pounds that I've weighed, you know, physically weighed. So some of them big guys, it's nice to have one stretcher that I know is a little longer to know that I can get them put up, you know, and get them to the right shape without the tail sticking off my board. So I'm gonna do one 6 foot long wide pattern, NAFA pattern. I'm gonna do 6 of NAFA's medium pattern, and then I'm gonna do 1 of their narrow pattern. I believe this one right here is gonna be the narrow pattern. So let's look at the patterns here a little bit. I'm gonna try and get you guys out of, there you go. So what we got is kind of the NAFA's wide pattern. They call it the Canadian section. They got the western, northern, and north central section. And then they got the eastern and semi-heavy section. So each one of these, if you look, that one's 9 inches wide at the bottom. That one's only 8 inches wide at the bottom. And that one's also 8 inches. But the differences are up here towards the top. So at 11 inches down, the wide one is 6 to 6.5 inches. And again, I'll put nice pictures of this up at the end of the video so you guys can see. This is NAFA's pelt handling manual. I had printed it off years ago, so I had it. But yeah, so at the narrow or medium sized one, it's 5.5 to 6 inches at 11. So it's like a full inch almost narrower than the wide one. And then it's only 5 inches wide for the smallest size. And then at 30 inches here, the wide one is 8 to 8.5 at 30 inches. This one's 7.5 to 8 at 30 inches. And that one's 7 to 7.5 at 30 inches. And then all of them are at 54 inches. I make mine 5 feet long, so they're actually 60 inches long. And again, I'll put a nice picture of that up at the end. What I have laying here is a template I made a few years ago. This is I call it the narrow coon, but that is actually the middle size. I use almost all the largest size and the middle size for my raccoons. I'm gonna make one small one for putting skunks on. So I do have one small one. Again, it's this one right here in my pattern, which actually ended up being mirrored. There's one bad spot in my sheet of plywood right over here. So I flopped my pattern from what I originally wanted. So I'll end up cutting around that bad spot over there. And by a bad spot, what it is there's a goofy overlap in the plywood right there. So I wanted to get around that. So I flopped my pattern here. The reason why, so let's go right into NAFA or fur harvesters. So NAFA went out of business. I still use, I think all my stretchers are basically based off of NAFA's patterns except for my fox and coyotes, because I had adjusted the head and whatever. And I do have videos out for how I made my adjustable fox and coyote stretchers. But everything else, so mink, muskrats, weasels, yeah, everything is all based off of NAFA's pelt or board standards, because I used to ship to NAFA. I was a big proponent of shipping to NAFA. Now, since NAFA's closed down, you have just fur harvesters. So I have what Fur Harvesters recommends. So there's this quite a bit fatter up here at the head end, and then from about here down, it's roughly the same. And I'm going to show you on this template I made. But so 2 inches down, they want it 3 inches wide. 6 inches down, they want it 5 inches wide. 12 inches down, they want it 6.5 wide. 24, it's 7 wide. 36, it's 7.25. And at 48, it's 7.5. All right. So this is a template I made for the narrow, what I call in the narrow, but it's NAFA's middle size. Again, I'm trapping in west central Minnesota, so we have big, heavy furred raccoons around here. I've had a couple top lot raccoons over the years. You know, we get top of the line animals here, and they're all big. My young of the year stretch 2XL almost all the time. It's been like 2 or 3 years since I've had one that's smaller than that. Like I said, the young of the year are 2XLs around here. I know if you go down to southern part of the United States, a 2XL raccoon might be the biggest size you have, and you wouldn't probably want to be putting them on the NAFA's widest pattern. You'd want to be using the 2 smaller ones, if anything. So with that said, I don't put raccoons on their NAFA smallest size. So I have on my all my raccoon stretchers, I have them marked. They're either marked coon narrow or they're marked, I know that's sideways, but coon wide. And I just have it because they're not that much difference, but when I'm going to grab them, I typically stack them in my basement, all the narrows together, all the wides together. So when I'm going to put furs on, I just grab the size I want and go. I don't mix my stacks usually, and if I do, I have them marked so I at least know what they are. All right. So with that said, this is NAFA's narrow board. For the top of it, I typically use a pop can. About the bottom of a pop can is the nose. I like that size. It seems like it don't overstretch my nose, and the nose of my pelt will actually kind of round over that nice, you know, and actually hold it on nice. Their pattern for the narrow size from the nose, 11 inches down, it's 5.5 inches wide. So what I did is I mark a center line down, and then I mark out 5.5 inches. At 11 inches down, at 30 inches down, they want it 7.5 inches. So I marked this at 7.5. At 54 inches down, they want it at 8 inches. So again, I got that marked at 8, and then I have it just straight from there on. So again, mine is 6 inches longer than they suggest. Mine's 60 inches. They recommend 54. Again, I need the extra length most of the time. So mine's 60 inches. The last 6 inches is just straight, 8 inches wide to the end. The same thing's true with my wide one. Let's just drop this up here. So again, I did the same thing, center line down, 11 inches, it's 6 inches here. At 30 inches, it's 8 inches wide. At 54 inches, it's 9 inches wide, and then it's 9 continuous from there. So this one's only a 5-footer. My 6-foot board is just going to be 9 inches all the way to the bottom, so it's going to be a foot longer than this one. So that's how I use them. I don't try to make it a nice curve. I go right from what they want it to be, straight line, straight line, straight line. And then I do sort of round the corner a little bit. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see that, but it is actually rounded here just a little bit. You know, it's not like a perfect sharp corner there. So I do round them on the corners. I do have a couple here that are finished. I'll show you them in just a minute here. So fur harvesters, theirs is quite a bit fatter at the nose. I mean, you could see the shape of my pattern to what they want it to be. So what I did is, just so I could show you guys, I marked, this is 2 inches down. They want it to be 3 inches wide. Well, my pattern's only roughly 2.5 inches wide. So I don't feel like this is not gonna overstretch the nose on a raccoon, where I feel like fur harvesters is going to. So the next measurement they give us is 6 inches down. They want it 5 inches wide. Well, I'm under 4. I'm like 3 7/8 at 5 inches. So if this was another inch wider, you'd be able to, the pattern's going to be really fat up here. Once you get down, you know, to here, which is, how far down is that? 24 inches down. They want it 7 inches wide. That's about what my board is. I'm a little bit wide here. This is a 7 1/4. They want it at 36 inches. I'm about 7 3/8. Again, I'm at 8 inches here. So this one's 7 1/2 at 48 inches. I'm a little bit wide, about right on at their 7-inch measurement. Right here, this one's 12 inches from the top. They want it 6 1/2 wide. I'm narrow there. I'm about 5 3/4. So I'm about 3/4 of an inch narrow here, an inch narrow there, maybe 3/4 again. So, I mean, that's going to be a pretty dramatic kind of fattening of the head and neck area. I don't like that look. I tried making one a couple years ago to that shape, and I had a hard time even getting the raccoon on there. It just really, like, it was almost too wide for the head, in my opinion. And again, for the raccoons that I catch here. When I'm making stretchers, again, I'm using NAFA's pattern, so it's not like I'm deviating from that. But if you guys watch my coyote and fox stretchers video, a fox, coyote, raccoon have more like a long, skinny, kind of pointy nose. They don't have like this big kind of bulbous nose. I'm trying to think what would have like a lion or something like that has a short kind of, you know, real wide kind of fat rounded nose. You know, they kind of have a pointy little narrow nose and jaw that kind of sticks out. Even badgers are the same thing, right? So it's their mouth, like to the back of where their mouth is still only maybe 2 inches wide. Well, the way fur harvesters want them stretched, you know, you're stretching it wider than what their mouth would normally be. So I tend to prefer patterns that are a little bit narrower at the head and mouth, and even the neck, because I feel like on fur out species, a lot of stretcher designs or stretcher sizes overstretch the necks. And it's very easy to see that when the buyer's looking at your pelt. So raccoons obviously are sold for in and it don't matter. But I also use this the middle NAFA pattern, or what I call the narrow pattern, for badgers, which you do sell for out. So that is actually, I didn't really go into that. That is why I'm building some more stretchers, especially the narrow. NAFA's middle one, I call it narrow. So we're gonna say that one more time. I call it the narrow pattern, which is NAFA's middle pattern. And then I call the widest pattern the wide pattern. So from now on, I'm just gonna call wide pattern or narrow pattern. That's NAFA's widest one and NAFA's middle one, okay? So, because I'm gonna keep making that mistake here. So my narrow pattern, I put on smaller raccoons. So like the young of the year raccoons, I put on the narrower boards. Some females are a little bit smaller in my areas, or in my area, and I put them on the narrower board. I put badgers on my narrower board, and I put larger skunks on my narrow boards. So with that said, I only have, I think, 6 narrow boards right now. So you put a badger on there, and they got to be on for 4 or 5 days sometimes to get them dry, maybe even longer than that. Because you got a good day or more before you can turn them, and then after I turn them, it's probably 3 or 4 days. So 5 days, say you got a badger on your board. Skunks are, you know, 3 days roughly. And then if I got raccoons on there as well, I run out of narrow boards pretty quickly. So that's why I want to make some more narrow boards, and I want to make one smaller board again for putting on skunks basically only. And it would be like some of maybe the smaller sizes of the skunks I'd put on NAFA's smallest size. So like I said, I am going to make one of those. Just the way the pattern laid out on my board here, I ended up with one. So I could have made 7 of the narrow version, 1 wide one that's longer. I could have fit them all on there, but I do want one smaller one. Okay. So that's why I'm making stretchers today. I have some of each size already. I got about 10 of the wide version now, and I got roughly 6 narrow ones. And I do have a few small ones. I have one right here, which is built basically to the small pattern. So we're gonna make some more so I could put up a little bit more fur at once and leave it on there. A lot of times I'm putting up fur over a weekend and then I'm taking it off the next weekend. If I was putting up fur kind of on a continuous basis, you know, every 3 days I could take off some skunks and put some more on, or badgers or raccoons, whatever, you know, whenever they're done, I could keep putting more on. But my way my schedule runs, once I'm done trapping, it's usually just weekends I'm doing fur. So I want to be able to put as much on over a weekend as I can, because basically they're on for a whole week. And then the next weekend, take all those off and put on a whole nother batch again. So this should get me plenty of boards. Basically, it just shortens the amount of time it takes me to put my fur up. Part of it is I trap through Thanksgiving. And usually by about the last weekend in December, I got to have all my fur put up and ready to sell. Because usually about the next weekend, the first week in January, or maybe the second weekend in January, is the fur harvester's pickup route in my area. So that leaves me about 4 weeks or 5 weeks maybe at the most to get all my fur put up and, you know, clean, combed, all that stuff. So again, the number of boards I keep is basically dictated by that and how much fur I want and can put up over a weekend. So I don't need to have 40 boards because I don't catch 40 animals in a season. I need just enough so I can do, you know, a good dozen animals or 15 raccoons, skunks, and badgers all in a weekend, and have enough boards to get them all on, and the right size boards. So that's part of my trouble in the past is like I only have so many narrow boards, so if I have a badger on one of them, or maybe multiple badgers, and I throw a couple of skunks on one, well, now that only leaves me the bigger boards to put raccoons on, and sometimes I do end up putting, you know, some smaller size raccoons on my wide board, you know, and I actually probably am losing length by doing that. So, and they, quite honestly, they don't look quite right. You know, when you put a 1XL raccoon on the wide pattern, it just doesn't look quite right. It just looks really bloated and fat for that small of a raccoon. All right, I think I've talked enough. I give you enough of the background here. We're gonna get right into how I laid out my board here, all that, and we're gonna get right into marking my board. And I'm not gonna film cutting it necessarily because it's loud with a skill saw and a bandsaw, all that. But I'm gonna give you an idea of how I cut it, how I shape it, sand it, everything else here. So let's see, we're gonna take these off. I think we're gonna leave that one. So we went over the patterns good enough, I feel like. Again, I'll put the patterns in the pictures of the patterns at the end of the video here, and also how I laid them out here as well. I'll put all pictures at the end so you guys can see what I'm actually looking at. I know I tried to film some so you could see it, but we'll put just a nice clean picture at the end for you. So again, I'm a drafter, so what I did is I drew up, you know, the lighter gray there, that is a 4x8 sheet of plywood. And then what I draw, I'm just trying to get so you guys can see. I draw a center line there. You can kind of see the dashed line running right down the middle of my stretcher. So, and then I measure to that center line. So we're gonna set this down. It's hard to show you. I'm trying to get so I'm not getting the shadow of my camera here. Let's see. So you could see right here's a stretcher, right here's a stretcher, right here's one, and right here's one. And you can see it doesn't go to the bottom corner. That's because on this side of the board, that one is in the bottom corner. So what they end up doing is, because they're 5 feet long, they overlap in the middle all the way through, and then this very top one again is a 6 foot, so it goes a little past the other ones. So I figured out where my pattern doesn't run into, you know, so the nose of one doesn't run into the nose of the other. There's a little gap. They look pretty tight in there, but there is a little gap in between them, about 1/4 inch of material in there, so one shouldn't hit the next one when you're cutting them out. What I did, again, I have measurements on the side here to the center lines of each one, Obviously the ones that are in the corners, I'm gonna use the corner of the board as the edge of my stretcher right there. So basically it's going to be straight and then it'll, you know, taper in here. Well, I guess you can see it on this side. So I got my temp weight weighing here. So I have it straight with the edge of my board, and then from here in, you can see there's a little whip there. That's how much it takes off from, you know, that measurement to this measurement. Actually, it'd be a little more than that. So by drawing my center line on my board, I can line the center line of my temp weight up with that. There you go. So now you can see a little better how much. You'll be taking a little over a 1/4 inch off here, and it tapers down to nothing to there. So for this one and the one in that corner, they're lined up with the edge of my sheet of plywood, because it doesn't pay to have it in and have to cut that whole edge when I can use the nice straight edge and the straight edge of the corner of the board. So I used the center lines that I drew on my thing, and what I did is I just measured and I drew my center lines coming. I'm trying to get so you can see. So this center line, you can see it stops short, you know, it doesn't go to the end. That one's coming from that end down to here. The next center line here is coming from this end going this way, and it stops right here. And then the next one ends right here. It's coming from that way. So like I said, you got one coming this way, one coming this way, and then the one on the corner is going that way. So what I did off camera here is I went and I drew all the center lines on here. There's one here, one here, one right here, there's one right there. I don't know how well you'll see that one, but it's right, I guess I can move you. It's right there. Okay, so I got my 8 center lines all drawn on there. I do have a template. So my template here, I'm not going to show using the template. It's pretty simple. I have a center line. You mark it up with the center line that I drew, and I just sketch around it, and then I can cut it. If you don't have a template, or even how I made my template, I have my center line on there. So what I need to do is I'm going to measure from the end of my plywood over here. I'm going to measure 60 inches, and that's going to be the edge of my nose. And then I'm going to mark back. You can mark back from 60. It's 11 inches back is where the next measurement is. I'm just going to measure from that end to where they're at. So it's going to be 60 inches to the end. It's going to be 49 inches. And then it's going to be 30 inches. And then it's going to be 6 inches. So 6 inches from the end, it's going to be this full width. 30 inches here, it's going to taper from 6 inches to 30 inches. Then it's going to taper from 30 inches down to 49 inches from the end. And then it's going to taper and round at 60 inches. So what I have is a T-square here. So what I'll do, and I'm going to do it off camera here, and then I'll show you. I'll turn you guys back on. So I'm going to measure, put a mark on my center line of my, here's my center line. I'm going to draw 6 inches, put my mark, use my T-square, and I'm going to draw a line across where my stretcher is going to be, or where just basically just go just past the edge of where I think the stretcher is going to be. 30 inches, draw my tick, use the T-square, draw the line across, and draw the line across, and then mark the end over here. So I'm going to shut you guys off. I'm going to do that, and I'm only going to show you on the one here, because again, I have templates, so I'm going to just use my templates to mark all the rest of them, except for this narrower one here. I have to mark that one too. So maybe I'll mark both of these so you guys can kind of see what I'm doing here, and then I'll turn you guys back on. All right, guys, so I went through and I marked 2 of the stretchers on here. And again, I'll mark them all before I cut them, but I only marked the 2, and I'm going to kind of show you how I go about, or how I marked them, and then how I go about drawing the edges and that type of deal. So what I did, measured from there, I want my stretcher to be 60 inches long. So I put a mark right here, and then 11 inches back, which is 49 inches, I put a mark. You can kind of see from here to the right there, there's a little short mark. 30 inches, you can kind of see the mark. And then down here, 6 inches from the end, I put a mark. And then I took my T-square, and I took it apart now, but I had my T-square put together. I just butted it up along the edge, and I drew a line, and I went a little further than I wanted to, but drew a line that corresponded with my, here's the end, 11 inches down, I drew my line. 30 inches down, drew my line. Hope you guys can see that. Yeah, drew the line, and then down here I drew the line. And then what I do is, okay, up here, I sketched in the arc. So again, about the bottom of a pop can, it's about a 2-inch diameter. So from one side to the other, it's about 2 inches if you want to know. So like an inch radius essentially. So I marked the nose. I also did the same thing on the small size that I'm going to make. I'm making just one of them. I actually noticed that I'm only going to make that one 4 feet long because again, it's going to be for some of the smallest skunks. And a small skunk, even with the tail, shouldn't be 4 feet. So I marked 4 feet, drew my line back. This is 11 inches down, so 37 inches. And again, I just put a little tick in the middle and then use my T-square to draw the line. And then this is 30 inches from the nose, so 18 from the end. Put my mark and then drew my line. And then I have marks. I'm going to go just right here to here, down to this line, okay? And I'm going to stay kind of in the middle because my light's the best here. Then what I did is I took my tape measure. I'll extend it out so you guys can see. All right, so on NAFA's narrow design or NAFA's middle design, what I call the narrow design, at 11 inches is supposed to be 5.5 inches wide. So what I typically do is I figure out 5.5, divide that by 2, it gets you 2 3/4. So from my center line, I mark out, so I'm starting say at 6, so 2 3/4 gets me 1, 2 3/4, and then I put my mark right there. And I'm crossing my line that I drew this way. And then I go 1, 2 3/4 down, and right here's my tick on that one. At 30 inches down, it's supposed to be 7.5 inches wide. So again, I mark that, I figure out what half of 7.5, which is going to be 3 3/4, and I mark my tick there and my tick here. And then down here, this is 8 inches. This is already set at 4 inches because again, I'm using the edge of the board. And then I mark over there 4 inches, and then I mark the end of my board at 4 inches because that's going to be straight. Okay. On this one up here, again, same thing. I drew, this is 4 feet. I drew my nose on there. I went back and then I measured out. Their narrow one is supposed to be 5 inches, so I went 2.5 each way. So right here's my tick. Right here's my tick. Right here it's supposed to be 7 inches, so this is 3.5 from the center line. This is an error line. I messed up when I was measuring. So it's this upper of the line here. So here's my center. I went out 3.5, 3.5. So here's my tick, and right there's my tick. And then like I said, I measured here. It's 8 inches here, so it's going to be 4 inches there and 4 inches to here. So now what I do, I took my T-square apart just so I got a nice straight edge. What I'm going to do is I'm just lining up the edge of my straight edge with the edge of that radius. And then over here, where's my tick? There it is. So there's my tick right here. Hoping you can see the tick is right there. And right here's the edge of my radius, so I want to turn that just a little bit here. Sorry, it's tough doing this one-handed here. Okay, so my tick is right at the edge. We're right to the edge of what I drew in there, and then what we're going to do here is I just draw the line from there. I know I kind of went past where you guys could see. Okay. So I drew my line for my tick, and it lines up with the edge of my radius. Then I go to, there. So where I put my tick here at the next measurement down, there's my tick. Right here's my tick. So I just line my straight edge up with that. So I'm kind of watching here. I got this in pretty good. Again, it's tough to do this, a little tough to do this one-handed here, but. All right, so again, I'm lined up right there with my tick. You can see the tick right there. You can see the tick right there. And then I just take my pen here, and I'm doing it with pen so you guys could see. Oop. Didn't get that very straight. Okay. So there's my line. I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me do this because it's tough one-handed. But the next one, I'll just line my straight edge up with this tick to that tick, and then that tick to that tick, draw a line, do the same thing on this side. And essentially you could see I got, roughly half of my stretcher done. So I would actually just continue doing this for every one of my stretchers all the way across. Draw my line across, put ticks at, half the distance from my center line each direction, put a tick, and then it's basically connecting the dots at that point. So I'm going to go through the whole board here. I'm going to use the templates I made because I have them made just so I don't have to remeasure every one of these. What you could actually do, if you wanted to draw one, actually cut the one out and then use that as your template. I made dedicated templates. These are out of 1/4 inch plywood. And I just weave them. I made them templates because I don't round the edges of them. So they're nice sharp edges and they're just a touch undersized. So like this is supposed to be 5.5 inches. This is about 5 3/8. Because then when I draw my line around the edge of it, it always ends up outside of that. And then I cut right kind of on the edge of my line when I'm cutting. Like here, you could kind of see the edge of my line there. Like right here, you'd see a little bit of my line. So when I'm cutting everything, I always kind of cut and weave just the edge of my line. So this is a little bit undersized by roughly 1/8 of an inch all around. So when I mark it, it ends up looking right, it ends up the right size on here. So without a template, you could go across and mark each one. Again, measure from the end, get your 60 inches, measure 11 inches back, mark it, 30 inches back, mark it, 54 inches and mark it, and then measure your width, put your ticks. Again, I did the same thing on this one, so I'll just, line up with the edge of that to this tick right here, draw a straight line to this tick, straight line to that tick. So again, I'm not going to sit here and make you guys watch all that because this video would be an hour long, or probably going to be that anyway, but it's going to be 2 hours long if I made you sit through all that. It's also very hard for me to film with one hand and do the marking. So like I said, I'm going to go through, I'll mark the whole thing, and then we'll turn you guys back on again. All right, everyone, so I got my whole plywood laid out here. We're just going to kind of show you what I got marked out. Again, I'm not going to make you guys listen or watch me run the skill saw, but so I'm on the opposite side from what we originally been looking at it. But so right here's my center line, right here's my line. So on this side here, this is going to be, the 6 foot long wide version. Here's my nose. So you can kind of see then the next one, it's hard, right where my thumb and my finger are. So it starts off of that end, comes down, and you kind of see how they run kind of parallel to each other here. So basically I have that, it's about 1/8 inch apart. So when I cut with a skill saw, it's actually going to cut both stretchers at the same time there. And then on this side I have a little bit of a gap. That one got maybe a touch closer than I wanted to, but I think they're both kind of running the same direction here, so I think we'll be fine there. So again, here's the nose of one, here's the nose of the other, nose, nose. So they go kind of back and forth. And like I said, I have them all. So right here's the nose of one, here's the nose of one. So again, they go from this way, from that way, opposite directions all the way across. So I did use my templates. I just used the center lines I had marked, except for I did finish off the one that we started. I used my ticks as long as I had them. And then this is the smallest version of NAFA sizes. I'm making it 4 foot long, and then I actually did have to use my tick marks because I don't have a template for that one, obviously, because I've never made one that's exactly to their size. So the one I have over here is close, but it's not like, not perfect because of what the width of that board was stock. So yeah, like I said, so what I'm gonna do now is I'll get my skill saw, it's laying right here. We're gonna start and we're gonna cut, probably plunge in, and we're gonna cut this direction along these edge ones. And then once I get down here, eventually it's gonna kind of pull out the side, right? And then we'll start up here on the head end of this one, on the opposite side, and cut, you know, and so they're all, it's straight lines. So cutting here to here should go real easy. Rounding that corner is a little tricky with a skill saw, but it can be done. And then from, you know, it's not really that much of a change in direction. I mean, it's, you know, there is some change there, but it's not that much that a skill saw, typically you kind of follow that edge, you know, and do the same thing, and then I'll cut out. So I'll leave this, will end up being kind of a point when I'm done. And I will use a bandsaw. I have it, it's sitting right here. A little bandsaw, and I'll use that to actually cut the nose. So again, and then the scrap, I'll just, you know, gonna have kind of a goofy skeleton here, but the scrap we'll use for other things. You can use them, I have used them in the past to make the actual belly boards, you know, because like right here, you're gonna have from here to here, you know, pretty good chunk. You probably get, I don't know, probably 5, 6, probably 6 belly boards just out of this chunk right here, you know. And then like here, you know, you have a stretcher and a stretcher, so you kind of have this section in between my fingers that's all ends up being waste, you know, and it's in between each one. Like right here, there's waste, you know, between here and here. This is a stretcher, this is a stretcher, you know, right here's the nose of one. So this whole section kind of ends up being waste. So we're gonna get the saws out. It's gonna take me a good while. It's probably gonna take me an hour to get all these sawed out. All right, so we've made quite a bit of progress since I last had you on here. Again, it was all skill saw work. So again, just cutting around the edges. The only thing that I want to kind of mention, so I have them stacked up. This is the small NAFA size, the medium NAFA size, or what I call my narrow size, and the wide one. The only thing I want to make a comment on is, like, when you're cutting the edges, it goes pretty good anywhere there's a size change, you know, so the taper changes. You know, some of these are pretty gradual, and I could, you know, just kind of tip my skill saw and kind of work around the corner. But all the ones up here around the head, it's just too steep of a difference of a change. So what I actually was doing, and I tried filming it, but it just didn't turn out for you guys, but I take my skill saw with the blade, you know, well above my thing, and I just kind of line it up with the edge, and then like plunge cut down with the skill saw, and then go. And then I was doing the same thing, like plunge down, you know, just kind of tip the skill saw in and cut that angle, and then stop, and then reset, plunge again, and then go again. So if anything, a few of the corners up here, right here, you know, where the shoulders would be, got a little wonky. Let's see if any. Yeah, like right, man, you can't see real good. See, but you can see kind of the sharp corner right here. That's where the two cuts from cutting this direction, and then I stopped, and then I changed and went that direction. Otherwise, what I ended up doing, like I said, some of the ones like down towards the middle of the boards, you could kind of follow the curve with the skill saw. You know, and it might bulge out just a little there. You know, you can see like here where the line is still. You can see where the line is there a little bit. What I'm gonna do is I have a couple sanders. So the next step is sanding and rounding the corners off. I have a couple here that are done, and I hope you could kind of see how it's rounded off. So I put basically a radius all the way around, you know, the full edge all the way down to basically the bottom. Like down here you could see, you know, the radius there a little bit. So what I'm gonna do, and I also have not cut the noses. So what I did is I just cut straight by, and then I just cut to trim the, that's all right. Oh, this guy's waiting on it. So I just cut straight by. And what I'm gonna do is I have my little bandsaw right here. I'm gonna go and I'll probably just take and I'll cut like straight this way, straight that way. Then I'll take, I have a belt sander here. You know, it's pretty aggressive. And I got an aggressive sandpaper on that guy. And I'll actually take that to kind of smooth the radius of the end off. Once I get that, and then I'll actually stand my board on edge. Let me get it to stand there. You know, stand it on edge like that, and I'll take this sander and basically just run it on the edge, you know, all the way along to kind of smooth out, you know, if I did any like little wonkies while I was trying to push the skill saw, the cord gets caught and it kind of makes a little woo-ha in the side of your boards. Trying to look if I have any, like, it's probably going to be very tough to see, but right here there's kind of a, it kind of dips in just a little right here on that board. Like right here. Let's get so you guys could see that. Right here, see this little notch in there? That was from running the skill saw, and you know, as much as you think you could cut straight lines, I'm not a professional woodworker, far from it, let's put it that way. But you get those little things, so I'm gonna take the belt sander here and basically just run it along the edges, you know, all the way along both sides. And then what I do is I just take my sander and kind of run it at an angle like that and kind of burn off most of the angle. Once I get, you know, like a kind of a chamfer on this edge, I'll flip the board over, do the same thing. Then I have this nice little sander. And I understand you guys may not have some of this equipment. You can do it with any sander. You can hand sand. The only thing with like plywood that you can't do is you can't like router a radius on the corner. It just isn't going to work. You're going to split chunks of your board off. But I got this little belt sander. It's got a flat disc on the side and a 1-inch wide belt there. But what it has is it's only got a support up that high. So in this area, you can really flex that belt in. So what I do is I actually just kind of take my board and I will kind of run it right in that. And it helps smooth, gives me a little smoother radius in there. So by that belt being on the flex, you know, I can get my board and kind of round the corner, and I'll run all the way around. The only part I don't do is the bottom edge. I leave that square, but basically starting anywhere, you know, on the edge here, all the way up and around, it'll all get sanded flat and then radiused all the way around. One thing I noticed in the past with some of my stretchers, I didn't sand the edges as good as I should have. Well, then it kind of leaves a little bump in there. Well, sometimes like your fur wants to get caught on that little bump. As minimal as it is, or as minor of a bump as it is, it still seems like sometimes it wants to catch on those. So I want to kind of make sure my edges are nice and straight. You know, as straight as I can keep them, or as smooth as I can keep them without having too much wiggle in there. You know, let's see, like right here, it's tough to see just because of the grain of the board, but right here, there you can actually see it. There's kind of another little woo-ha where I tried to go around that corner. So again, just sanding the edge kind of smooths all that out a little bit. It kind of deburrs it a little bit, so there's less chance that your fur is going to get caught on it. So the next thing I'm going to do, and again, I don't want you guys sitting here listening to the sanders run. I'm going to literally go at these and sand the crap out of them. Sand all the edges and then round the corner. I think when I get everything flat, you know, all the edges, you know, flat and all that, and I start using this guy, I might try and turn you guys on and show you a little bit what's going on there. I may take just a scrap piece and kind of show you what's going on with that once I get that far. But I just set that up here so I could show you. But yeah, we're going to go through all 8 of these now. I got 1 of the smallest NAFA size, 6 of my narrow size or NAFA medium size, and then 1 of the NAFA wide size. So that one's 6 feet long. These are 5 feet, and I made this one only 4 feet Because again, on a smaller skunk, you know, they're only going to probably go this far, and I have, you know, tail to here. I have a little extra room, so I think that should work good for skunks. So, and we'll see down the road. I may end up making a few more of this size. I'm not doing it this year or whatever, but we'll kind of see how many skunks I catch. And now that I have all these extra boards, we'll kind of see if I start running out of stretchers again, you know, putting up fur. If I still have some more skunks I'd like to keep putting up every week and I just don't have enough boards, I may make a few more of the small ones, you know, next summer or whenever I get a chance. So, all right, not really looking forward to it, because this is the tedious part of it now, is doing all this sanding. It's going to take me probably twice as long to sand everything as it did to mark everything, cut it, all that stuff, as it's going to be just to sand everything. So once you kind of get going, you get into a groove, but it does take a long time. But the more I do right now, or the better job I do right now, the easier my job's going to be when I'm actually putting the fur on there. You know, if you leave little, you know, burrs or splinters hanging out the edge, every time you put your pelt on there, it's going to catch on that little splinter. So I want to try and, like I said, get the edges as clean as I can, kind of as smooth as I can, that way it's not, you know, damaging my pelt when I take it on and off or anything like that. So, all right, I think that's all I got for you right now. We're going to get sand in here. We're going to get the tune box playing. We're going to start jamming here, and we're going to get some sanding done. So, like I said, if I get so I can show you anything that I didn't explain here, we'll turn you guys back on. Otherwise, I think we'll have most of these sanded or pretty much done sanding and next time I turn you on. All right, guys, so we're going to go over real quick how I'm doing my sanding. I'm not going to get too in depth here, but I'm just going to quick kind of show you what I'm doing. So, again, I got my belt sander here. So all I'm doing is just kind of winding it up and trying to hold it as flat as I can against the side of my stretcher here. And I do kind of look my board over before I start to make sure there isn't like a gouge or something I need to sand a little extra. This board seems pretty good all the way around. So all I'm doing is just going to run, and then I'm just going to kind of sand, trying to hold this as straight up and down as I can. So it's as simple as that. I'm probably not going to be able to show you, but it's nice and perfectly smooth now. Probably ain't going to show up. Just give myself a swiver. Ain't going to probably show up too well on the camera, but you know, like this is a sod. It's still a little rough right there. And then where I sand it, it's nice and perfectly smooth. So once I do that all the way around the board, including the end of the board, so I did go at that with the bandsaw, and then I'll go with that sander and kind of round that all off real nice. Once I'm done with that, what I'm doing to put the radiuses on the edge. Again, I'm just taking my belt sander and I'm setting it at probably a 30-degree angle here, and then I'm just literally going around and I'm trying to make like an 1/8 inch chamfer on there so I can see that I'm sanding about an 1/8 inch back. And again, I'll start right at the very end of my board and I'll go all the way around, but again, I'll just kind of show you what I'm doing here. So all right, so see if I can get you guys can see that here. So you see how it's like an 1/8 of an inch back, you know, and it's at a nice little bevel. So I'm basically, I do that all the way around the entire board. Once I get that done, it'll look like this one. So you can kind of see, you know, how far it's sanded back. Then what I'm doing is I'm taking this sander here. All right, and again, I'm using this part of the sander because I can flex that. You can see how far in I can flex that there. I'm going to try and set you up so you could see what I'm doing here. It may be a little loud, and I apologize for that. So then what I'm doing is then I take my board I already have, you know, like a 30-degree chamfer on there. So I'm actually going to set that probably at like a 45 and then push back in there. So it's going to kind of start at the edge of what I already did and then sand kind of halfway around is all I'm really trying to do here. So again, like a 45, and then I'm just going, and I would have hit the camera there had I kept going, but I literally just keep running a full length all the way down the board. So I do this side, flip it over, do this side, and then I actually flip my board around, and now I'm doing the opposite side, and I would go back the other way. Again, it's a little tough to show you exactly what's going on there, but like I said, I'm trying to kind of push this in a little bit so I get that flex in that belt, and that helps me kind of round over that edge nice, and you know, it's pretty nice and round all the way around. And then I sort of kind of gently rub my hand on the edge so you don't get splinters all the way. And then again, I even do like the nose. I'll try to round it back a little, round it off this way. So this board here is completely done, sanded. It was already done before I turned you on. So that little bit I just didn't finish it. So yeah, just go over, that's what I'm doing for sanding. It's actually fairly quick. Again, I'm just using this guy, 30-degree angle all the way around to get a chamfer. Then I flip my board over, do the opposite side. And that's after I sand the edge to make sure it's all nice and smooth. And then round the nose off. I do all that before I start doing any of the chamfering because I don't want to go back and sand part of my chamfer off just to try and round the ends. So, all right. So again, that's all I'm doing. Again, I got 1 out of the 8 done so far. We're going to keep at it. Like I said, I only got, I don't know, 5 minutes maybe into sanding that one board. But it took me a little bit to get kind of set up here too. So once I kind of get going, it's going to be 5 minutes or less for each one. You know, I probably got 45 minutes of sand in here to go, and then we'll turn you guys back on. All right, guys, so you guys could probably tell I moved down in my basement here. It's the next day here. We're going to the last step here. We're going to mark the sizes on the boards. I'm typically only going to mark one side of the boards. Some of them I might mark both sides just depending on if the board is warped just a little bit or not. I made up a little jig because I like making jigs, and it's going to make this way easier. I already tested it a little bit on an old stretcher and on one of the new ones I just made. So yeah, this is the last part of this video, is just marking the sizes on there. So the sizes are a guideline. You know, if I'm a 1/2 inch short, I might actually stretch my fur to get me just past that line. But if I'm any more than a 1/2 inch, I just pin it right where it is. I don't worry about pulling it and stretching it and all that. I just pin it right where it lays. Again, they're forms, not stretchers. So, all right, we're going to show you kind of what I got here. So what I did is I made myself a template here. I just got a sheet of plywood on the back. I don't even know how wide it is here. We're about 16.5 inches wide. It really makes no difference. I just wanted it wide enough so with my widest stretchers in here that they weren't hitting the edges. Then what I did is I put a 1x3 or 1x4, sorry, so it's 3.5 inches wide on each side. I made sure I flushed them up with the ends. Then what I did is I have North American Fur Auctions, NAFA, and I have Fur Harvesters. Right here's the Raccoon sizes. Again, I'll put a better picture of this at the end. And right here's NAFA's Raccoon sizes. They are identical in size. The only thing is that Fur Harvesters only goes up to 4XL on their links, where NAFA goes up to 6XL. You know, basically it's just every 3 inches, you know, is basically what each length is once you get over XL. So what I did is I measured using those charts. I measured from here down and put a mark. and I measured from here down, put a mark, and then I drew a line across there and here. And then I actually marked the sizes, and I did that for each size. So you got small, medium, large, extra large, 2, 3, 4, 5, and anything beyond this line here is 6XL. Now, what I got is a straight edge. I'm using the T of my T-square here. I could use the longer one, but I don't need to. What I have on my, I'm gonna pop this guy out of here. Again, I just marked this one just to kind of play with it. What I did is I put a center mark right here, right there. There's a pencil mark. So, how I locate my stretcher in here is I just lined up my center line on my board with that mark. Once I had the first end done, I measured from this side over to my center line, and then I went down here and I measured from here to my center line and adjusted it till I was even, and then I just clamped it down. So we're going to set you guys up here, and I'm going to throw the next one in so you guys can hopefully kind of see what I'm doing here. All right, so up on this end here, I'm just going to line up my center line on my board with that center line on the jig, line it up flush with the end, and just put a clamp on there. Okay, now I'm going to measure from the outside here. I'm about 8 3/16 on my jig here. So now I'm going to go down to this end. And I'm going to measure 8 3/16. I understand you guys can't see the measurement, but okay. And all this is doing is just getting my stretcher set and square on my jig. I made sure this side here, my plywood was perfectly square using my T-square. So I actually trimmed a little off of the board on both the end and on my side of it here. And then I cut that side square off of that. So I made sure that everything is nice and square on my jig here. Now, what we're gonna do here, I just got my pocket knife. You can use anything you want. I have used in the past just a permanent marker, but I have run into issues. Like here's a perfect example. I've run into issues. You see how the my lines, and like this says XL large, but my lines like bled out. Like over here, my lines are completely gone, and anything from basically 2XL, I mean, I can just barely see the line, but there should be a line here, and one about here. So they just bled really badly with a permanent marker. Like here's another one. This is an older one that's made out of plywood. You could sort of see like, this is black. This is where the line was, and it actually just stained the board just a little bit, but my line down here are basically gone until I get all the way. Oh, this is a new line that I marked. So what I was doing is I was measuring across this board as a template to kind of verify the width of everything. So yeah, like I said, down here, all my sides right here, you could see part of the line, but all in this whole area. So this is gonna be extra large here, I think. So everything below extra large, I lost all my lines. So what I have done on some of these other ones here, this one got it? Yep. Is I sort of got away from using a marker. These are actually like gouges in the wood. So what I did is I scored it first, and then I just went back with the marker and then marked them. And so far, I mean, they've stayed pretty good, but you could see that pretty darn easily, even on a dark colored board. Right here's the last one. I don't necessarily care, okay? Is this 2XL or is this 5XL? It does not matter to me at all. the animal is the size the animal is. You know, like I said, I'm not gonna, oh, I want a 5XL raccoon, stretch him way down here to get 5XL out of him. If this is where he lands, that's what size he is. So I'm probably not even gonna mark the sizes, or if I do, I mark like one size, and then I can kind of count each way. I very rarely ever have any raccoons under 2XL. My young of the year are typically 2s. Once in a while I get a extra large, and I bet I could count on one hand the larges that I've caught. So I actually don't even think on most of my boards I'm not even going to mark the little sizes, especially on these wide boards. So this is again, I marked it at the bottom a coon wide. And I'm going to go through on all these new boards I just made, and I'm going to mark the size on the bottom, whether they're a wide one, the narrow one, or the small one. All right, so leaving a nice little groove in there. I bet I'm like 4 or 5 years, and you can see that line plain as day. See, and like on this side of the board, I didn't mark it at all. Again, I just slide the coon on the same way on this board every time. I have the markings. So with that one, I kind of freehanded it back in the day. With this setup, I'm not going to have to freehand it. Okay, so I'm going to use my pocket knife. You could use like a flat screwdriver, a utility knife. My jig is setting up just high enough that I don't think a utility knife would reach from here to here. So we're going to use just my pocket knife. All I'm doing is I'm going to line my straight edge up. Right there's my line. We're going to line it up there. Okay, so you guys can see the line. We're going to line it up there. And then we're going to set you guys down, because it's going to be hard for me. Okay, just taking my pocket knife. I want to try and make sure I kind of stand it straight up and down. And I'm pushing down with some pretty good oomph. 2 good passes across there. And you guys could see, like, I could catch my fingernail on that groove. So that groove ain't ever gonna disappear on me. And again, all I'm gonna do, and I'm not gonna make you guys sit and watch the whole thing, but we're just lining up your side here with my mark on my jig, my side, straight up and down, up to the next one. And like I said, even all my old ones that I've had done for years, we're going to go through every one of them, and we're going to scribe a mark on all of them. So there you can see, here's the 5 or 6XL, 5XL, right here's the 4XL. And again, you don't have to go like terribly deep. I mean, I'm only maybe a 30-second in there, but I wanted enough. Again, I'll go back here. I'll maybe show you one here. Trying to get so you guys could see here. What you could do is you can go back and just fill in your line. And it'll kind of bleed down into that groove. And I'm just using a black permanent marker here. You know, it's going to make it stand out really nice right away, but as that marker bleeds away, my groove is still going to be there. Right? So, I mean, now you can really see it, but like, you guys aren't going to probably tell, but it actually like bled down into that groove I just cut. So, I mean, that thing's permanent. You ain't gonna wear that off, and if you do, your board's probably junk by that point. So, all right, like I said, I think that's the last little bit of this video. I know this ended up being way longer than I expected just for making some raccoon stretchers. But again, there's a lot of good information in here, I feel like. Basically, you should be able to go out to your shop right now, and within an hour, you should be able to have, 8 raccoon stretchers finished. That's about probably what I have into these, maybe an hour and 15 minutes if I wasn't filming. If I was just going at it, it didn't take long at all with the skill saw and with the bandsaw to cut them. Once you kind of get going sanding, you kind of get the groove going. It doesn't take long to get them sanded. I don't have perfect round corners. They're kind of, hexagonal shape or half a hexagonal shape. It doesn't matter, just as long as they're smooth enough for your fur to slide on. They'll wear a little bit as you use them. You know, like some of these old ones, you know, they're pretty rounded off, and I didn't have them sanded nearly as good as I did these. But I think just from putting the fur on and off, you know, they kind of round off. They'll absorb some of the, you know, the oils or whatever, and that's what kind of turned them darker in color. So yeah, that's why these are nice and bright. You know, and this one here, you know, is kind of tan looking. It just, they absorb some of the moisture from your pelts and the fat from the pelt as they dry. So, all right. Again, the only thing that I'm not going to show you on video is I'm just going to write on the bottom of this and probably do as long as it's in here. This is a narrow coon one. Again, I got the smallest one. I'll mark that one coon small on there. This stack here is all going to be the narrow coons that I just built. There's 4 more of them there. And then this is the tall wide one I built. So I'll mark coon wide on that one. And that should be it. Like I said, we're going to be down here for, I think it could take long per one, but I got all of my old ones are standing here, and there's some more standing right over there. I got to get size measurements marked on. I want to make a point about my jig here, so it's super simple. When I'm done with it, I'm just going to store it in my trapping shed. I got kind of a little room in the back that I keep some of the woodworking stuff I built, like my beaver skinning rack and some of that. I'm just going to store it in there, just make sure it's setting flat or leaning flat up against the wall. It shouldn't really warp, but honestly, like I marked the raccoon sizes on here because I'm going to be doing 20 stretchers or more, I bet, by the time I'm all done here. But I should be able to use this same jig for marking anything. So I do have my otter board is standing over there. We're going to actually mark all the sizes on my otter board. I'm not going to mark the size here necessarily, but once I get it clamped down, I can measure and just mark on my board where it is. And then, you know, make sure my straight edge is straight across. I don't want it like that. You know, make sure it's straight across, and I'm going to mark that otter board as well. Using the same jig, I can clamp it down nice and hold it steady while I scribe my lines on there. It's just going to take me a little bit to figure out each one of the links. You know, probably what I actually end up doing is probably just putting a tick here and a tick there, and then scribe my board. Do the same thing at the next size. You know, I only have the one otter board, so I don't need to have permanent marks on here like I do with the raccoons. So for these, I just used a pencil. Nothing fancy. Again, it's just a jig. It's not going to be used for anything other. You could, I mean, I probably could size my pelts on here, you know, after the season's over and get an idea of what sizes I have. But all right, I feel like I babbled on long enough for you guys. There's a lot of stuff in here. If you got questions on something, if I didn't show something as good as you would like, or you have questions still on what I went through, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. I'll try to get to them. You know, I try to answer as many of the questions as I can as you guys have them. And I encourage you guys to read through the comments as well, because there is times where, like, if I do miss something, you know, if somebody asks about it in the comments section, it is worth your time maybe just to scroll through there and maybe look at their questions, and then, you know, you should be able to see my little icon below it. If you click on the replies, you should be able to read what I replied, and if I forgot something, missed something, didn't explain it well enough here, chances are it's probably explained a little better in the comments down below. Otherwise, we'll see you guys on the next Schmattz Outdoor video. Well, as it turns out, I wasn't done. One more important thing that I forgot to mention to you guys. In all my stretchers, I drill a 1/2-inch hole in the bottom of them. And the reason, so this is an old one. I have this one marked and narrow coon on the bottom. So 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1XL, everything smaller than this is a large. And again, if they're smaller than that, I don't really want them on that board anyway. That's why I have this one here. This is the shortest one I made, and I marked all the sizes from small, and I quit at 3XL. So that line is 3XL, because I'm not going to put a 5XL coon on that small board. Anyway, holes. What I have in my underneath my four joists is rows of nails. So I just slide it over there. Obviously, if my freezer was shut, here, just move it over whole. And then what I do is a lot of times for raccoons, because they do drip, you know, there'll be enough grease, they run towards the head. And so part of the, I like the grease running downhill, so then it doesn't get in my fur around the apron of the pelt, or around the bottom edge of the pelt and the tail. So I run it down to the head, and then again I'll just put like a blue shop rag here. Usually, you know, use them skinning, fleshing, whatever, until they're somewhat dirty, and then I'll fold them up and put them right below this. So I have rows of nails here, and every one of these four joists is up here. There's rows of nails. There's nails on this side. All these all have nails all the way over here. There's some too. And here, you know, and along here I got some. And then in this section on a couple of these I got nails. So I hang all my pelts upside down, including like muskrats. Typically I have this whole corner kind of with muskrats in there. And we got, you know, and then I kind of put raccoons here and then that other bay over there. So all I got here, drill, 1/2-inch drill bit, somewhere in the middle. Boom. And a hole. So I got all these marked. This was the last one of the narrow ones, and I got that one wide one to mark still. So I'll actually have to go back and drill holes in all these. So that's the last thing. Mark them, drill a hole, mark the scale. Simple as that. All right, now I think that's everything for this video. Again, leave comments down below, read the comments. We'll see you guys on the next one.